let's go ahead and get started. We're going to have people continuing to roll in, but as a reminder, you will receive a recording of this webinar after the fact. So definitely take notes if you'd like, but know that you will have access to this afterwards. And we also are just sending out any webinars that we do for 1 month in the next month's newsletter, which we rolled out in September. So this coming November, you'll also have access to this webinar via that newsletter email. If you have any questions that come up during the presentation, please put them into the Q&A or the chat box. I will be monitoring those as we go through. I know Thomas has some questions for you guys, so please do not be afraid to, provide your feedback, engage yourself in this webinar. It is going to be a little bit more hands-on. Today, we are hosting Thomas Mann. He is the Customer Success Manager for our featured Partner of the Month, Agency Zoom. We love working with Agency Zoom. It is an employee enablement tool that helps agencies streamline their process. You can boost your sales team's performance and lead management while also boosting your retention through automated customer engagement, creating a polished online presence, also by helping generate Google reviews as well. So they really help out in a lot of aspects of just managing your customers. So we're excited to have Thomas here today to talk about taking your agency digital. There's a lot of demand these days just to have more of a digital presence. I know you guys have heard us talking about, social media, just taking your marketing online. Thomas is going to talk to us about managing your team if they're still working remotely, holding them accountable, how to maintain that one-on-one feel with your customers while, transitioning to a more digital space. So thanks so much, Thomas. As always, I'm going to turn off my video unless I'm engaging, but I am here. So if you guys have any questions, I'm always monitoring the chat and I will pop on if needed. So take it away, Thomas.
Thank you for the intro, Kelsey. And I'm excited to be here with all of you agents on, and we'll get started. So what I'd seen in the chat so far looks like mostly East Coast attendees at this point. So I'm also on the East Coast. I'm out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'll kick this off with, as Kelsey said, I'm the Customer Success Manager here at Agency Zoom. And I will give you guys a little bit of my background to start. So what got me here, I grew up around the insurance industry. My dad was a principal agent for 37 years. I entered the industry in 2014 as a principal agent, full multi-line sales for a captive insurer here in North Carolina. I then transitioned to independent space and commercial production. From there into the insurance consulting space, which is what led me here to Agency Zoom, finally in the InsurTech business. So that is a very abbreviated version, but as customer success manager here, I oversee the success team, help users implement Agency Zoom and continue to utilize that system as they transition to becoming long-term clients. And I really enjoy connecting with agents, using my direct experience from all over the agency world and operations to help them, solve their challenges, implement solutions, and streamline things. So when we talk about going digital, that can certainly mean different things to different folks, but in today's context and with everything, the situation that COVID-19 has created, it certainly changed the working world, not just insurance, but the working world at large. And particularly at an agency level, in my opinion and experience, insurance isn't known for being remote or even necessarily the most tech forward of industries. So while working with over 7,300 agencies here at Agency Zoom, I've gathered some insight on how to help with the transition. Now, whether that transition involves going into a more hybrid model of employment where folks work remote out of necessity originally for COVID-19 and then transitioned into, some time in office, some out of office, or maybe, with everything going on staff-wise, you as an agency principal decided to change things up and hire someone that works out of state full time. And so whether we're going to a completely remote model, whether we're using hybrid work, or whether we're just talking about going digital in the sense of streamlining processes, getting into a more paperless environment, also something we aren't known for as insurance agencies. That's what I want to focus on today. So where I really want to drill down is in these things. So process management, maintaining team culture, and how that interplays with the remote work model, staying sales focused, team accountability across the agency, not just for a sales team, not just for certain facets of the agency, but how do we meld that culture with staying accountable to one another, especially coming back to if we aren't all in the same office, and keeping the personal touch. So when we talk about process management, I want to introduce a couple of things here. So the most successful digital agencies have firm processes in place for prospecting, onboarding, service, and retention. Additionally, using automation whenever possible to keep in contact with a customer, or as they become a customer, prospect to customer at each stage of the customer lifecycle. So obviously, prospecting, we want to make certain that your agency has a consolidated pipeline to fill so that new business opportunities are worked promptly, and certainly we don't want anything falling through the cracks. Onboarding wise, we want to codify a repeatable process for onboarding, which is step one, and then using that automation power to automatically dispatch some new communication each time someone is sold. So, you want to welcome them to your agency. You want to follow up if they've used DocuSign or an e-sign process. You want to make sure that's done. And you can automate messaging, text messaging, depending on the technological stack you're going to use. You can go ahead and put those systems in place so that someone in the agency isn't physically doing that each time. And then, of course, our service and retention piece. We want to stay on top of each customer's renewals. So you need a firm process there that's followed based on personal, commercial lines, whatever the policy type may be. And then we want to be proactive in our outreach to review their policies and coverage and manage service requests and claims processing on the service side. So with that in mind, I want to tag Kelsey back in for a minute to talk about some of the things she's learned in the agent education realm for processes that have been effective for agencies she's working with.
Yeah, so I would say generally, as far as like what's working, obviously, and I'm not just saying this because we're hosting a management system right now, but you need to have some sort of CRM in place where you can automate your follow-ups, even like a system that gets that person on the phone quickly. Just anything in place, like automatic distribution, text follow-ups, email follow-ups, like anything that you can do to just automate the process is going to give you a huge leg up. Because some of the key things that are so important when it comes to working leads is like, probably the most important, getting on the phone as quickly as you possibly can. And a CRM is going to help you do that. And then not only that, some people will work a lead for a week or two. Maybe they don't get that person on the phone. Maybe they don't close the sale. And then they just toss the lead. That lead is not dead. That person is going to need insurance in 6 months or 12 months. Put it back into your customer management system. So that way it pops back up in 6 months. And now you have, a fresh lead that you paid for months ago. Just try and get the return on that lead for as long as you possibly can. Leads are not dead. And obviously having an automated process is really going to help with that.
Yeah, thank you, Kelsey. I love that. Particularly, a lead is not dead at a global scale, right? We're not just talking about premium QuoteWizard leads. We're talking about any lead, whether that's something from, a community outreach event you did. I know those are perhaps a little different now in the time of COVID, but definitely to Kelsey's point of using a system that will let you circle back to opportunities. I've certainly worked with the agents who use the I'm calling till they die or buy strategy. right. So that's going to be, um, you never want to be necessarily the fly that needs swatting, but the first to follow up on that lead, the first and staying in contact, letting them know that you actually had tried to contact them before, keeping that rapport. Thanks for peppering that in there, Kelsey. Appreciate it. So moving on from there, folks, if we focus around these three tenets of the insurance business, once we've got our processes codified, we're going to need to introduce the tools that can help enable the remote work environment and that can help us, make our lives easier in the agency world, i.e., not having to do all of this one at a time, each person using automation and moving into this digital space. So to that end, we've got to give them the tools, them being the rest of the agency, and then of course the agency ourselves. So making sure your agency has systems in place for the following are going to be critical. But also when making that remote transition, it's incredibly important to maintain team culture. And in this regard, technology can be your best friend. So we want to keep that team environment and be there when you physically aren't. So I'm going to ask you guys while we're in this slide, I'm taking you through these things, what systems are in your technology stack in your agency? So if you guys want to put that in the chat, I would appreciate it. But as Kelsey had mentioned just a minute ago, whether you're talking about an agency management system or if you're a captive agent, whatever your policy or customer management tool is, that's going to be first and foremost. I know that might be really basic for some of you folks, but I do work with giant, long-established agencies as well as scratch agencies in my job here at Agency Zoom. So making sure you've got that all in one place where everyone, one hand can see what the other is doing. So having a policy management tool in place, VoIP phones, absolute necessity these days. We don't want to be tied to, we certainly don't want to be tied to just a landline infrastructure if we can help it, to enable those remote positions and help us be competitive as employers moving forward. Video conferencing, clearly important. If you ask Kelsey and I spend a lot of time on it myself, being a remote person for Agency Zoom. Obviously Zoom is now, again, post-COVID, a household name if it wasn't before. An internal instant messaging software. We use Slack at Agency Zoom. I know a lot of our agencies do as well. And a digital hub to stay on the same page and see what the rest of the team is doing. That's going to be a theme moving forward, is anytime we can roll up something to a hub where everyone can see in the interest of ultra transparency what's happening in your agency. That's going to reinforce that culture that you have in office for remote folks, regardless of where you're working, and keep that same accountability to one another. So obviously that's going to go a long way towards maintaining your efficiency, regardless of what employment model you're using, and obviously letting you stay in contact with one another. So that's important on the personal side as well, right? Especially if you've got remote folks. So you're going to want to celebrate successes, on a personal level, as well as working on improving scenarios. Like if you're coaching, feedback in various sales situations, all of this is going to be important. So looking at the chat, I see we've got Zoom from Roger, ZipWhip for texting. I know a lot of agents use ZipWhip and like it. You see these logos I put down here. Ring Central being one. That can be a one-stop shop that also incorporates Zoom for conferencing, as well as VoIP phone, as well as texting in Ring Central. Twilio, phenomenal if you guys are looking for, and by the way, I don't get any kickback from Twilio, just some tools you should be aware of. Twilio is a very inexpensive texting solution. If you're looking for, say you have a phone infrastructure, maybe you're tied to a contract that doesn't support texting, certainly something to look at there. They also do phone service. Back to what Roger said, he is using Slack for intra-office, which I'm a big fan of personally. How else are we gonna, post the gifts to one another when we're in there? Um, let's see here in the chat. So Frisch has also mentioned SF Connect for texting, Skype, and Zoom. Skype I haven't used in a while just because the last few companies have been Zoom, but thanks for the call out there. Uma, which I'm actually not familiar with, as a VoIP solution, also from Roger. So definitely love the suggestions there, folks. Zoom, of course, like I said, kind of the household name now. I think Slack's sort of getting there, but I'm glad to see that some of the folks on the webinar are already adapting and utilizing this stuff. I think hopefully Roger and Fritz would both agree that this has been using these tools has certainly improved things, whether they're using remote folks or not. So from there, once we've got tools in place, obviously this is the tech stack. This is going to be your sort of everything in your tool belt and where things are going to flow from. But this is the bare necessity when we talk about going digital. Obviously, a lot of all of these are digital platforms, more or less. So that's going to be your framework from which everything else is going to flow. So from there, when we talk about culture, accountability, and staying on the same page for, our sales teams, we're going to want to stay sales focused, and we're going to want that to be transparent throughout the agency. Because obviously, first and foremost, in the agency distribution model, we are sales organizations. So keeping your team focused as a sales organization is obviously going to be critical in maintaining that culture, especially if you're working remotely. The pipeline management tool. So sometimes those overlap. They don't always have to, between your customer management as well as your prospect pipeline management tool. That's going to enable you to work your time sensitive leads more efficiently. I think Kelsey will tell anyone who listens that getting a lead on the phone will be absolutely paramount to making sure you get your return on that lead. Since she was kind enough to bring her video back on, I'll actually tee her up right there, since staying sales focused here and getting your leads into this platform, QuoteWizard leads, auto in particular, one I've seen a lot, being a prime example. Kelsey, do you want to go ahead and just, while we're on the topic of being sales focused, would you share a couple of the best practices you've seen with QuoteWizard for working these leads once they're in a pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, outside of the speed to contact, which is super important, some other key factors to keep in mind when you are working leads is like the time of day. A lot of people just try and call all throughout the day. You can really save yourself a lot of time if you're just calling at like key hours. A lot of studies have found that between 8 and 9 a.m. Is really great. And then again, from 4 to 5, see like the highest contactability rates. Obviously, speed to contact. Really just having salespeople who aren't afraid to hear no over and over and over again. I mean, leads are a different beast. Like, not only are you competing with other Farmers or State Farm or Allstate, like same captive carrier or independent carriers in your area, you're competing with like at most 3 other agents who are working that same lead. So you really just need to be on top of your sales process, on top of your automation process, and your follow-up process. And really that's what it comes down to, is having a solid pitch, having a solid sales cycle process where that lead, if you're not selling it, it's coming right back to you, 6 months, 12 months down the line. But also that you're not just working it for a week. Like, we do recommend doing at least 12 touch points in the first week, whether that's texting, email, calling, snail mail. But really, you should be working that lead for like a solid 21 days. A lot of people don't even pick up the phone until the 6th call attempt is like pretty average for reaching someone. So those would be my best practices. We do have, actually, just to little plug here for the Agent Ed program, we do have a free webinar. If you haven't attended it, I do it bi-weekly. You guys can sign up. It's like a very short little 10-minute video where we walk through like all of the best practices for working leads. You can have your producer sign up for it, whatever you'd like. I can just include the link to that in the follow-up email after this if you guys are interested in attending. Highly recommend it. And then there's a Q&A at the end if you wanted to ask me any questions about that process. Yes, okay, I'm seeing some yes pleases.
Yeah,
I'll definitely do that.
definitely want to send that out, Kelsey,
Yes.
based on what we're seeing in the chat.
Yeah. And then two, I also, as part of the agent education program, we produce a bunch of like articles and stuff. I just wrote up an article in collaboration with Craig Wiggins Consulting. If you're unfamiliar with Craig Wiggins, he is an Allstate agent, but this particular consulting business is open to any carrier. So I know he's got farmers people doing his trainings, a couple State Farm here and there, a lot of independents. We just did an article with them on best practices for working leads from one of their top agents who writes like 20 million in premium every year. So I'll definitely just include that in there as well. It's coming straight from his mouth, like how he works leads, which is really helpful, totally free. So I'll just include that in the email. Sorry, I just like took over this presentation. Back to you, Thomas.
Hey, no, I'm happy to hear it, Kelsey. Obviously, I was the first time I'd met Kelsey in person was at a Craig Wiggins coaching event. So I love the full circle here. Kelsey, perfect. So when it comes, guys, when we're talking about the pipeline management, right? So whatever platform you're going to put that on, whatever strategy you're going to implement for these leads, something I've found that is super helpful to me as a salesperson, my time in production, and with so many of these agencies that I've helped here at Agency Zoom, we need to give our sales team a visual representation, right? So whatever platform you're using, I find that it works best when they can like literally see where their pipeline is, what stage they're at with various deals, and make sure that that mirrors your sales process. So in order to keep that sales energy in your agency, we're going to implement this tool that's going to encourage transparency. And also on this, generally, at least the best salespeople, fairly competitive, that transparency is going to help foster that healthy competition and keep your production team focused and move away from something I've seen my whole career in insurance. I don't know if this will resonate. I hope it doesn't with the folks on the call, but the post-it pipeline. So you'll see a literal deal board on the bottom of a producer's monitor, and it will be follow up with, Thomas about auto quote, and there'll be 10 of those stacked on the pipeline. I might have been guilty early on myself of that, but I promise you, when we talk about going digital, there is a better way. Not what I'm talking about when I say a visual representation. And then when everyone can see what the others in the agency are doing from a sales perspective, that's going to keep them focused and keep that sales momentum up. So the best platforms when you talk about selecting a pipeline management tool are going to offer an integration with your preferred lead vendors or some method of whether it's a Excel import, whether it's a real-time integration to get leads, whether they're purchased like your QuoteWizard, Auto, Home, whatever, whether they're purchase leads coming in or whether they're leads you've collected over the years, win back lead opportunities, whatever the case may be, make sure that there is, you're not going to just have to go in one at a time, and ideally they'll offer an integration with your lead vendors so that those will be delivered in real time into your deal board for your pipeline management. So sales focus, right, and accountability oftentimes overlapping, but when we talk about a digital framework for an agency, remote work, depending on which roles are remote, who you've got where, we want to maintain a culture of accountability. Transparency is going to go a long way there, but I think generally speaking, I've seen a lot of organizations get caught up on the production side, so get lost in the accountability. Transparency might be there for the sales team, but what about customer service representatives? What about associate agents, folks who aren't necessarily on the production team, but we want to feel accountable and feel like they're bought in and we're all headed in the same direction as an organization. So from a sales perspective, the right pipeline tool, is going to foster that accountability. But the most effective digital agencies, we're going to need, a piece to create that buy-in for the whole team, regardless of role. So once you've invested in those digital agency essentials, and got your pipeline management up and running, you've made those processes repeatable and given them platform. This accountability is sort of the glue that sticks it all together. So we want to make sure that we're combining sales results, service results, rewarding top performers, coaching those who might be lagging, and feel that everyone in the organization is pulling their weight. So regardless of whether we're talking about insurance agencies or not, if you've ever worked anywhere, whether that was in an entrepreneurial system, but if you had more than one employee, making sure that everyone on the team feels like everyone else is pulling their weight and there's no collective action problem, no freeloaders, is going to create a better work environment and happier staff. So obviously you want them to understand their role and enable them to understand what other teams are doing and create that cross-team functionality. So focusing your service staff on prompt task follow-ups and then sharing the reporting on that with the agency, just like we do on the sales side so often, is going to yield excellent results and more clarity across the entirety of your agency. So when we talk about that, that's one of the things we talk, the three main pillars. So we want to make sure that we've got our prospecting, our onboarding, and then our service and retention. I feel like the service and retention piece, when it comes to digital tools that the agency uses, when it comes to shouting out performers there, a lot of the time in these agencies I've worked with, we focus, because we are sales organizations, and you've got the agents that'll tell me all day, well, Thomas, everybody's in sales. It's true, but generally you're going to have some support staff. You're going to have other functions. You might have a tech person. You might have someone who isn't really dialed in on the sales side. And so putting something in place that'll allow you to monitor that performance, but then also share those results with the agency, is really what can be, and I've seen for some agencies, be the missing link, as it were, when we're talking about being remote, being digital, being less file cabinet oriented. All of that is going to be, when you can digitize that and put it in that same sort of deal board with that visual representation, that goes a long way in fostering that healthy competition and transparency. So something I always hear from agents, especially when we talk a lot, as we do at Agency Zoom, and almost anyone does now, about automation. So touch points is something we hear a lot, and we want to make sure that we're, making that as effective as possible, because we all have a junk email address where everything gets rolled up to, and it's got like 3,300 notifications that are unread on your mail app on your smartphone, and you're like, whatever, this is just my sign up email, right? So the pushback I get from agents when we talk about utilizing automation and helping streamline those processes is, we don't want to sound spammy. They don't want their communication to sound scripted. Makes total sense. And they want to make certain that all of their messaging sounds like them. So whether you're whether you're already utilizing automation in your agency, whether it's something you're considering, you've got your task follow-up in there, your client communication, all rolled up to help help your agency be more efficient through automation. We want to make sure you've entrusted your automation to a platform that'll let you tailor your automated communication to sound like each piece was written by you. So you're going to see a better response. I guarantee it. You're going to see a better open rate. You're going to see a better response when, for instance, these automated touch points are coming from someone in your agency's email address. They aren't coming from a generic, info@managency.com. It's going to look like it's that same sort of continuity you see with like in junk mail, as we call it, spam mail, whatever you want to call it. When we're talking about actually physically mailed things, we've all seen the like advertising mail where you get the handwritten look, and that's something I'm going to bring up in just a minute. Keeping that same sort of personal touch across your digital touches as well. So actually using a platform that will let you customize and tailor your automation to sound like it's coming from someone in your agency is critical, because you don't want to, I always use the analogy, you don't want an off the rack suit. You want something that's been tailored, looks really, really good. So in that regard, utilizing a platform that lets you script it, lets you send a touch point from the specific person they're working with. Again, we don't want that nebulous, info email address. So if I'm a producer in the agency, I'm working a deal with Kelsey, I don't want to have that coming from nowhere. I want it to say from, Thomas at maninsurance.com. So making sure that that is actually the same way you would have that conversation in person or hold that appointment in person is being echoed in your automation touch points. So utilizing a third party service to stay even more personal. Again, I'm not a founder of Thanks.io, but a ton of agency Zoom users love this. For instance, they offer affordable rates to automate handwritten postcards, note cards, letters to your clients. That's something you could integrate into your onboarding process for a nominal cost to you. And that's really going to reinforce, unlike, say, a carrier who's just doing the direct like call center sales model, that's really reinforcing something that I hear all the time about Thomas. Our value proposition in the agency model is they know who we are. It feels personal. They can call their assigned service representative. They know who the principal agent is, et cetera. Utilizing a process like this and then enhancing it as it's an automated process can be a game changer for your agency. I actually have an agent that I've worked with several times, and as he builds out some interesting stuff, he's primarily a mid-market commercial agency. And as soon as he is reaching out to anyone in any one of these businesses in this prospect pipeline, he is using a Thanks.io integration to send out what looks like a handwritten letter to each one of these folks, letting them know that he's researched their business, talking about his process and his value proposition as a commercial agent. These Thanks.io things, I've actually seen one in person. They do not look like they were just mass printed. It does look like real handwriting. And this is one of those differentiators and something you automate to retain that personal feel. Even if you're in a large city, that smaller town feel that is oftentimes attractive about using an independent agency, using a captive agent that's local, someone you actually know, and those folks are back to accountability. You feel like Thomas, if he's your agent down at Man Insurance, is accountable to you as a client because you're not just the faceless corporation. Keeping that personal touch and making sure, this will ensure that you don't sound scripted and spammy, but also reinforce what, frankly, a lot of our clients love about the agency model. So to wrap this up, the essential elements of taking your agency into the digital age can best be summarized this way. So codify the processes you use in your agency now, streamline those as much as possible, and adapt them to a digital framework. When I talk about adapting those to the digital framework, that's going to mean going back to those essential tools and making sure that your staff is enabled as much as possible to be efficient, to harness the power of automation at every opportunity while maintaining that personal touch, investing in those tech tools to enable that remote workflow, stay in touch with each other as well as the prospects and clients, and define the culture and set the expectation of how going remote, if you choose to go that route, or just becoming more digital, isn't going to change the feel of the agency, and incorporate a transparency tool so everyone knows where they stand. So just like Kelsey did earlier, to give a quick plug about some of the other awesome resources that the agent education process here at QuoteWizard is putting out. You guys see the logo on my shirt, the logo on the presentation. So I've got to give a quick pitch here for our product. So Agency Zoom is an employee enablement solution that's designed to help you execute on all of the points I've outlined here. So managing your pipeline, automating your processes for the biggies, your prospecting, your onboarding, your retention and service, and integrate with your tech stack. So integrate with Twilio, integrate with ZipWhip, as Roger mentioned earlier. We integrate with QuoteWizard. That is, we are a preferred partner so that your QuoteWizard leads can actually be delivered in real time. You'll still get your email letting you know you've got a new lead. In real time, those can be dropped into your agency Zoom pipeline so that you're getting on the phone with them as quickly as possible. And keep everyone in your agency informed of where you stand. We have a really rich reporting suite. We're gonna roll up those sales metrics for you with the launch of our service center. We're giving you that same sort of dashboard style reporting metric for your service team, for your claims processes. And speaking of tailored and not off the rack, we're going to make certain that you are able to customize your pipelines for both service and prospecting so that it mirrors your sales process, it mirrors your service process. We don't want to dictate to you the way that you should automate for your prospects and clients. I will mention something that Kelsey said, circle back to when she was talking about her best practices. So 12 touch points in the first week. If you're talking about working a purchase lead, folks aren't going to oftentimes pick up till the 6th call attempt. Obviously, that's really a great way to reinforce the importance of automation for your agency. And I would love to get you on a demo if you're interested, tell you guys more about Agency Zoom. I think in the follow-up, Kelsey will have a way to connect with me. If not, Kelsey, please put a way for them to connect with me. And before we end it, obviously, Kelsey, you let me know, but if anyone wants to put in the chat any questions for me or Kelsey for that matter, if you would like to come off mute, I think Kelsey can let you do that. But I'd certainly open the floor up.
Yeah, so we can either, if you don't want to speak up, that's totally fine. You can just put your questions into the chat or the Q&A. Or if you'd like, you can use your little raise hand option and I will unmute you if you'd rather speak openly. Any questions while we have Thomas here? Sorry, we ran a little bit over today, but obviously you guys get a recording, so no worries if you have to jump off. All right, doesn't look like there's any questions. So, like I said, I will include the pipeline to success links as well, along with our white paper in collaboration with Craig Wiggins Coaching and Consulting, which we haven't even released yet. I'll just send that to you guys so you have kind of a first glance at that as well.
Look at all the bonuses Kelsey is giving you guys with the unreleased Craig Wiggins. I love it. I love it. I was glad I was part, Kelsey.
Yeah, it's definitely good to be at the live webinars because we got a lot of little extras that you don't necessarily get with just the recording or the follow-up of the recording. So thanks guys for being here. Thank you so much, Thomas, for being here as well. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and hopefully we'll see you next week.